You ready to roll? Hey, my name is Grace, and I haven't made a video in a long time, but we're not going to talk about that. What we are going to talk about today is books. I haven't read as much this year as last year, but that's okay. All that matters is that we read a little bit. And so I wanted to do my 5-month into the year wrap up. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So the first book I read this year was Olympus by Rachel Smythe. I have read the webtoon comic of this series, which goes way beyond volume 1, but I love the work that Rachel Smythe does. And so I was wanting to start my year off strong with a 5-star, and I did. This is a Hades and Persephone retelling set in kind of a modern day Olympus underworld, and it's just so fun. The art is like amazing. It's just super, super cool. I am a Greek mythology, ancient Greece bitch, and I love a Hades and Persephone retelling. So yeah, this was my first read, 5 stars. Next, I read the second book in A Court of Thorns and Roses series, A Court of Mist and Fury. It was fine. And I've kind of thought the whole series is fine. It is enjoyable. My husband compares it to like a CW show, and I think that's like a really apt description for it. For me, it's like an easy read, it's quick, it's not too deep. And yeah, I think I gave this 3.5 stars because I do really like Reese, and I like his inner circle that we become more acquainted with further on in the series. If you want just like a fun, easy read, a little bit of fantasy, a little bit of action, and some romance and smut, then this would be a good read for you. Next, forget about Crying in the Club. Everybody's crying in H Mart now. I read Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. As you can see, it's got quite a few stickies because this is beautifully written and is heartbreaking. It's a memoir about Michelle Zauner, also known as Japanese Breakfast, the artist musician. It's about Michelle and her relationship with her mom as her mom comes towards the end of her life and eventually passes away. It is heartbreaking. It is full with so much beautiful food imagery that I was like starving and crying each time I read it. I gave this, I think, 4 stars. It's a great memoir. I mean, it's popular for a reason. I think it's been a New York Times bestseller for quite a while now, and it is much deserved. So if you want to be sad and hungry, yeah, I would recommend this one. Next is a book that took me a long time to read. I don't know if I'm like that much of a poetry girly. I got this for my birthday in August and I finished it in January. So it took me quite a bit, which is okay. We don't have to like read books, you know, within the week we get them. Devotions by Mary Oliver, which is basically a collection of poetry from kind of like a sample platter of her poetry from like different collections that all gets assembled here, which is why it's like so thick. I don't think poetry collections are usually this thick. Mary Oliver, a lot of writers that I love and a lot of people that I love to like learn from and listen to love Mary Oliver, so I knew I wanted to get acquainted with her work. When I asked for this book, I wasn't aware of how big it really is, because I mean that's a lot of poems. That's a lot of poetry. I did enjoy this a lot. I think probably for me, poetry does work better in like smaller bite-sized increments. So while I do love the poetry of Mary Oliver, I think for me, probably smaller assemblies of poems would be better. I think I ended up giving this 4 stars just because there is so much in here that some of them were really like winners in a big way, and some of them were just like kind of filler for me. So I will definitely be reading more Mary Oliver. This probably wasn't the best like first introduction for me though. All right, next is a nonfiction. I read Cast by Isabel Wilkerson, The Origins of Our Discontents. Oh my God, this book is very good. It's incredible. So it's basically a look at how the US has a caste system, a race-based caste system. And it explains that and compares that to the caste system that exists in India and the caste system that existed in Nazi Germany. And basically the through line between all 3 of those societies is caste. Especially at the beginning of the book when there's a lot of like foundational work being done, I was like underlining and highlighting everything because it was just like really, really like breathtaking and infuriating and enlightening, the way that there's like a section where in Nazi Germany, they were trying to get creative and think of ways to codify segregation and discrimination in their society. And they were like, oh, well, the US is doing it great. Let's just like follow their lead. And they got to a point where they were like, okay, some of this is a little too crazy for me. This is going a bit far. And that was just like, I think about that all the time, just how the US has really been a leader in discrimination for the rest of the world and how shameful that is. So it was really, really compelling if you are wanting to learn more about, just the US and the ways that we continue to discriminate and segregate and categorize based on race. Yeah, this is a really good one. Okay, next, we have an absolute banger. A reread from last year, Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. Honestly, one of my top 5 favorite books of all time. I think about it so often. I love this book. There aren't as many stickies in it as you maybe would expect. And that's because like some of these are just entire chapters that I'm like, let's just highlight the whole chapter. This is a novel of the plague, and it follows Shakespeare's family, namely like his wife and his 2 children. So his family. This is so beautifully and hauntingly written. I like don't have words for like how much this book slaps, but it slappeth hard. It's so freaking good. It's heartbreaking. Basically, the author's note says, in the 1580s, a couple living on Henley Street, Stratford, had 3 children. Susanna, then Hamnet, and Judith, who were twins. The boy Hamnet died in 1596, aged 11. 4 years or so later, the father wrote a play called Hamlet. So that's basically what the book is about. It's about the plague, it's about family, it's about grief, it's about marriage. Oh, you guys, this book is so good. And I really want to read it again. I'm actually, and we'll talk about that later, I'm trying to read more of Maggie O'Farrell's backlist just because this book is like so captivating and beautiful to me. It is historical, so if you're not into more historical settings, it's probably not going to be a good fit for you. But it did win the Women's Prize in 2020, and it's just, I love it. Yeah, I love this book. So I read this and I gave it 5 stars, but it was a reread from reading 5 stars the first time. Okay, next I read a book that was a Christmas gift from my brother-in-law, so thank you, Cody. If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. This is like a dark academia, kind of a thriller, literary thriller about a group of kids in this elite school. So this is also very Shakespeare-y, so like kind of a continuation after Hamnet. I was really feeling the Shakespeare vibes because they are theater students at this like elite small art school, and they like quote Shakespeare to each other a lot. Like they reference Shakespearean plays and use like Shakespearean language and just their like day-to-day chatting and talking with one another. What did I even rate this? I gave this 3.75 stars. And I'm trying to remember, I think the ending fell a little flat for me. It's very atmospheric and lush. I really loved the description. I really liked the Shakespearean elements because I was a theater nerd and I like loved Shakespeare in high school. Still love Shakespeare, I guess. But I think for me, ultimately, like the ending didn't pack the punch that I wanted, but it was really fun and enjoyable. I remember like saying out loud, like, I'm really enjoying this, but I would recommend it. It's a fun time. Okay, next I read I Am by Maggie O'Farrell. So this is where the backlist is coming in because I just want to read more of her writing because it's gorgeous, and this is no exception. This is her memoir about 17 like near-death experiences that she's had in her life. She calls them brushes with death. So one thing we love about Maggie O'Farrell is that she is morbid as hell, as am I. And so it's like, I love her. There's kind of a theme in some of my favorite books. Some of my favorite books that I've read so far have that like really morbid through line. Pause and move on from that. I thought this was really beautiful. Not a feel good, not a pick me up, but it's just an incredible showcase of like Maggie O'Farrell's writing and just how breathtaking it is. Having read the memoir, and then I read another one of her books this year, you can really see how her brushes with death and the way that it's impacted her and her family. And then having read Hamnet, like it just like death is present, and like this suffering that she has witnessed and experienced is like so present in her works, and you can just see like little pieces of her life. So like, for example, she has a daughter who is like chronically ill, who is like really ill. And in one of her books, there's a child that has like really, really severe eczema, and you can just see like how those mirror each other, and like how she was able to write from her experience in that. And yeah, so it's an incredible memoir. I would highly recommend it. I think I gave it 4 stars. I love Maggie O'Farrell, and I can't wait to read some more of her books. Okay, after that, I read The Poppy War, which is the first in a trilogy, a high fantasies trilogy. It was good. I gave it 4 stars. I was prepared to really love it, and I didn't. And I'm honestly not compelled to like continue on in the series. Now that I'm like a couple months removed from it, I like don't feel strong feelings about it. I don't want to continue, but it was like a good fantasy, and I would recommend it, but that's kind of the beginning and end of it. Like, yeah, it was fine. So maybe it's like not even a 4-star for me. Okay, next I read a romance, One to Watch by Kate Stayman London. This was a lot of fun. It's basically The Bachelorette, but with a like fat bachelorette. That's how the character describes herself in the book. I had a lot of fun. I liked the main character, like our protagonist, more than anyone else. And I really, in the end, didn't care who she ended up with. I was just like rooting for her. But even in the middle of it, I was having fun reading it as if like I was watching The Bachelorette. Like it gives you that experience. So I would recommend it. I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. Just because, like I said at the end, I was like, all right, I don't really care. I'm not really rooting for any of these guys. There were certainly guys that I was like rooting against. B was like a main character that you really want to root for, and it was like a really fun time. Okay, next I read Tin Man by Sarah Winman. This is like such a sweet, beautiful book, again, about love and loss and grief and marriage and companionship. And the writing was just really beautiful. I have quite a few little tabbies where I was like especially moved, and it was like really quick. I gave this is like almost a 5-star read for me. Got 4.5, and I would highly recommend it if you want just like a sweet, short, melancholy little book. All right, next I read It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. Colleen Hoover is a sensation on the internet. She has a cult following. So Hoover mamas don't come for me. Okay, first of all, I thought this book was a rom-com. It is not at all. This book is about domestic violence. It is a picture of domestic violence and the complexities and nuances that take place when you love somebody that causes harm. I was expecting one thing and got the other, so that sets you up for failure. Yeah, but I gave it 3 stars. It was like fine, solid. It definitely has its merits, but again, just not at all what I thought it would be. Okay, next up, we have another nonfiction, and that is Say Nothing, a true story of murder and memory in Northern Ireland. So in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, and I have read this book and I still struggle to differentiate the two. There was a lot of like flipping back and forth to remember like who was who and who was what group. But basically, Northern Ireland, I think, doesn't want to be in the UK anymore. And there's a time called the Troubles, and I don't know. This book, it was really good. I gave it 3.75 stars, but it is like dense. This is a heavy book, like physically heavy. It's really dense. I like was trying to keep up at first with like all of these tabs. I was not successful. I loved the narrator. I listened to this on audiobook for the most part. Thought it was a great narrator. Wanted so hard to keep up, but I think I needed more foundational understanding. And as an American reading about the Irish, I was like a little behind. I was not keeping up, but it's really good. I think if you read a lot of historical nonfiction, it would be right up your alley. It's a very popular book. It's a New York Times bestseller. So yeah, it just, upon reflection, I'm not sure how much of it actually stuck up there. Okay, next we have Lonely Castle in the Mirror by Mizuki Sugimura, which was translated by Philip Gabriel. I read this book because my favorite booktuber, Allison Pages, loves this book. It's one of her favorites. And it was good. I mean, it was really good. I think this might be my first translated work that I've read this year or since I've like picked up reading again. It's about the loneliness of childhood and enduring bullying and trying to find your people and isolation and loss, and coming together. And it's like magical realism, but hardly. Like there is like a magical realism thread, but it's really more like a character study and characters like coming together and enduring and finding one another when they're really lonely. I don't know if that makes sense, but I thought it was really good. I gave it 4.25 stars, so like not a 5, but definitely beyond the 4 points. And then the ending, like the last like 20 pages are so sweet and like pack such a punch. So yeah, this has gotten really popular, I think, because of like Allison's seal of approval on it, and I think it's much deserved. Okay, next, I read a major work of fiction, The Overstory by Richard Powers. This guy, I didn't realize like how much of it really resonated with me, but it did. This book is incredible. I don't know how somebody wrote this book. So basically, The Overstory, it starts out basically with like 8 short stories, like 8 different people and their connection to trees. Like you're basically reading 8 short stories about people and trees, and it's all over the place and in really different capacities and in really different ways. And then the second half of the book is how those 8 storylines are connected together. I don't know how he wrote this book. It is beautiful. It is so like complex and interwoven. And I literally like, it makes you look at trees in such a new and incredible way. I'm like, I don't want anybody to talk to me about cutting down a tree until they've read every page of this book, because it's just so incredible. It is thick. I think it's like almost 500 pages and it's dense, but it is worth taking your time to read through because it's just, oh my God. Oh, I gave it 4.75. And I think that's because I didn't understand the ending. Like everything up until the ending, I was like rocking with, and I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is amazing. And then the very, very end, I was like, I don't know what happened. I don't know what I just read. And then I read it again and I still didn't get it. So that's why it's like that close to being a 5-star. Oh, next, another banger, another 5-star. Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. Oh my God, it's so good. This book is so good. It is like so sweet and endearing. The nature imagery in here is gorgeous and breathtaking. And it just like slaps. Like 10 out of 10 hits so hard. It's just like so sweet and precious. You okay? Hi. Hi, Bubba. It's a classic. It's about this girl who's an orphan who in Canada, at Prince Edward Island, who basically gets sent to live with this older brother and sister. And it's about the shenanigans, and She's very spirited and unique in this small town, and it's just so good. And if you just need a warm little hug around your heart and sweetness, I would recommend Anne of Green Gables, 5 stars. Okay, next, I read another romance, Hook, Line, and Sinker by Tessa Bailey. This gave me what I needed. It ticked all the boxes for me when I read it. Upon reflection, am I like, yeah, it's one of my favorite romances? No. Nope, I don't feel that way. But when I read it, I was like, like what I'm looking for in a romance is like when it's hot as hell outside and I just want some ice cold lemonade. And that feeling is what I want to feel at the end of a romance. Like satiated, refreshed, delighted, all those things. And that's how I felt after reading this. It's about a girl and a guy, and they are friends, and then they're more than friends. And that's basically it. It was fun. All right, talking about another 5-star. I don't know what happened, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. This had some beautiful, beautiful, beautiful lyrical, flowery writing, and I was eating it up. I really loved it. It's about a secret society. It's about books and stories. It's about adventure and love. And that's it. And you might say, that's pretty abstract. Well, that's about as concrete as I can get to explaining this book. Because it's weird and meta. And it made me want to put on a cardigan in like a library, in like an old-timey, dimly lit library, and have a cup of tea and eat a croissant and read a book forever. 5 stars. Okay, next, another Maggie O'Farrell. This Must Be the Place. This is kind of my foray, the beginning of my foray into literary fiction this year. Basically about a family it's about family. It's about separation. It's about finding each other. It's about figuring out how to love. And yeah, it was pretty good. I gave it 3.5. I didn't love it as much. Well, I'm comparing everything to Hamnet that I read by Maggie O'Farrell. So there we go. That's kind of setting us up for, it's not going to be 5 stars, probably. Although I have pre-ordered her newest book that's coming out in September. And I'm hoping it'll get here in time for me to go on my vacation, because that is going to be my beach read. And I'm very excited. Yeah, it was fine. Like, this book is good. I have a couple tabbed points that are like really poignant and beautiful. Let's see if I can find one. Damn. Okay. My relief at her touch verges on indescribable. I don't think our language contains a word with sufficient largesse or capacity to express the euphoria I feel as I bury my face in her hair, as I dive inside her coat and press her form to mine. What redemption there is in being loved. We are always our best selves when loved by another. Nothing can replace this. Bars. Like, okay. So yeah, there are a couple moments that were like that in this book. And it was good. But it is like a literary fiction book that's like not really about anything. Okay, next. What? Yes. We revisited the seminal classic, Twilight by Stephenie Meyer. And it was so fun. I read this book when I was in middle school. I played the trumpet in band. I was so desperately like boy crazy, but was not allowed to date in any way, shape, or form. And that yearning and longing was just, it all brought me back. It all brought me back right here. This book, if you don't know, is about a girl that's not like anybody else. She is not like other girls. And she meets Edward Cullen, who is a vampire, and they fall in love. And that's the beginning and end of it, babe. And it was so fun. I didn't rate this because it's like rating it felt superfluous. Like, what's the point? But it was like really, really fun. And if you want to have fun, I would highly recommend a reread of this if you've read it before, or if you haven't read it before. It still kind of holds up, sort of. So next I read, this is when I spiraled into my Bridgerton black hole, where I like didn't read anything for like 3 weeks because I was just watching Bridgerton like all the way through, over again, all the way through. So I read The Duke and I by Julia Quinn. This book is questionable. It's all right. The romance aspect is all right. I have the second book in the series, which is Kate and Antony's love story. I'm like saving that for a rainy day when I really need it. But as far as the show, season 1 is not my favorite. And then book 1, there is a key plot point in the book that gives me pause and is weird and like could absolutely be argued to be like assault. So I just gave it 3 stars because I did enjoy it for the most part. But yeah, kind of weird, kind of a weird thing. Okay, next, more literary fiction. I read Crossroads by Jonathan Franzen. I have like never really read a book like this before, and I don't know if these kind of books are for me, although I know that this is the first book in a trilogy, and I do plan on reading the next book that comes out, so we'll see if I like get more into it. But it's basically about this family in the 70s and their connection to this youth group and how each member in the family is kind of at like a crossroads in their life. It's like 600 pages of like deep, intense character study, which I enjoyed, but by the time I was done, it was kind of just like, okay. So it's like one of those like really like smart literary books where like nothing happens, but it's just about like intimately and deeply getting to know these characters. Also, I think this like cover and spine is so bitchin'. I just like love the way it looks. Okay, next, another 5-star read that I have been waiting to read this book ever since I saw Books and Lala post about it. And it hasn't been available in the States for a while. And like on a whim, Trey and I went to Barnes & Noble and I saw it and I had to get it. And that is Mrs. Death by Selena Godin. So this book is about death personified, and somebody is helping death write their like memoir, like write their biography. I must like books written by poets. Yeah, I like novels written or like memoirs written by poets, because like Priest Daddy by Patricia Lockwood, I know that she's like a published poet, and Priest Daddy is one of my favorite books, and Selena Godin, I guess, is like a poet, and this is one of my new favorite books. Pretty morbid, pretty dark, but beautiful. Also like really cool bipolar representation, which is significant to me for no particular reason. But yeah, a lot of underlining, a lot of tabbing. I freaking really love this book. If you want to read a book about death, but also about life and living, banger. Next, we have another Women's Prize winner that I've been wanting to read for quite some time, Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. It's like basically about, there's a labyrinth, there's a house, and there's a little person that lives there, and you don't know much more than that, and you're just figuring it out as you go. And the reading experience feels like you are in a labyrinth, and it's very cool. It's like, I don't know. It was a very quick read because it's formatted like diary entries, and you just want to keep reading and like figuring out like what is going on, like where are we, what's happening. And I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was really great and I would recommend it. Okay, next, more A Court of Thorns and Roses. I read the 3rd book in the series, A Court of Wings and Ruin. And I did enjoy it. Like I said, the more that I get acquainted with like the Night Court group, the more I like them. And I'm kind of compelled to continue in the series just for the sake of like getting more from them, as opposed to like, I'm kind of sick of like Feyre and Rhys at this point. But this book is thick and it was kind of hard to get through at some points. Like it was kind of a slog, but it was fine. Giving war, giving battle, giving action, adventure, then go for it. I think I gave this 3 stars. I think I've given all the books in the series 3 stars. All right, next. So I was at my local indie and I saw like a recommendation card for this book, and it said it's Winnie the Pooh meets Murder, She Wrote, imagined by Wes Anderson, which is like, oh my God, sign me up. So I got Shady Hollow by Juno Black. It was fine. It was cute. It was like a very easy, cozy mystery. I was anticipating a little more intrigue. I was like trying to figure it out, and it ended up being like pretty straightforward, which is fine, but it was like super cute. It would be really fun to read like in the fall if you just want a nice cozy mystery. Okay, last two. So another thing I picked up from my local indie was Elektra by Jennifer Saint. Again, I am a sucker for ancient Greece and Greek mythology. I just can't help myself. Jennifer Saint wrote Ariadne, which I really enjoyed that last year. I know some people thought it was lackluster, but I really, really enjoyed it. And this one follows Clytemnestra, Cassandra, and Elektra. And I'm like an auto-buy person when it comes to Greek mythology. So I guess I didn't realize that like it did follow more people than Elektra. I kind of assumed it followed the same format as Ariadne, who like basically just followed Ariadne and her sister, but the perspectives are mostly Clytemnestra and Cassandra, which I was like, okay, girl, where's our title character? Excuse me. I gave this 3.5 stars, mainly because I have read at this point like multiple books from the perspective of Clytemnestra, and while I do enjoy it, it's not, wasn't really anything like fresh or new for me in here. Like I would 100% recommend 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes first and foremost if you want like a woman's perspective on the Trojan War. I did like this more than Daughters of Sparta, which was like Clytemnestra and Helen. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the rest of them, but I really enjoy the rest of them, and that's an experience that I look for. So yeah. And then my most recent book that I finished at the end of May was Anne of Avonlea. So it's the second book in the Anne of Green Gables series. Anne of Green Gables, there's like 6 books in the series. And this follows Anne as she is a teacher in Avonlea. Here's the deal. Anne Shirley and Gilbert Blythe is like my OTP. Like they are my one true pairing. I love them. I watched the Anne of Green Gables movies with my grandma growing up. They are still like comfort movies to me. I love them so much. So I want to get to the Anne and Gilbert stuff in the books. And spoiler alert, it doesn't really happen in the second book. So I've got the third book on deck, ready to see when I get my Anne and Gilbert fantasy. So yeah. So those are the 28 books that I've read so far this year. I had quite a severe slump there towards the end, but now I feel myself coming out of it. And I just started a new job and my schedule's kind of changing a little bit. So I'm feeling more hopeful about hopefully making more YouTube videos. I want to do that and I want to be more creative, and I love BookTube and I would love to contribute in some way. So if you are new, if you've watched this far, please like leave a comment down below, just because I would love to like connect with you and thank you for watching. And yeah. So if any of these books sound interesting to you, let me know. Let me know what you've been reading, what your favorite read of the year has been so far, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.